The Strange Tale of Panorama Island. Edogawa Ranus. Even if you live in the same M prefecture, you may not notice many. The I Bay tries to go to the Pacific Ocean, and at the southern end of S County, he flew away from the outside islands and has a good green wharf. And the small islands that are not enough in diameter are floating. Now there is almost no one who is almost the place where the nearby fisherman is at the same time, which is equal to the uninhabited islands. In particular, it is isolated in the crucible of the end of a certain pot. And if it is not even a small fishing boat, it is also dangerous to be close to a small fishing boat. And it is not a place to approach until it is dangerous. It is. The person in the place is called the offshore island. But since when the whole island is the owner of T-City, the Makoto Mountain, May's Hideta House, and the fishermen belonging to the same family before inside, there are also things that loving things were built in a hut. And they used to live in the mashed sashimi, resection, etc. But it is completely off. It is completely off. The island mysterious work started. A group of people named 1,000 people, or a group of gardeners came on a separate tailoring motorboat and gathered on the island every day. Where to bring from where to bring. Giant rocks, trees, steel bones, woods, and numbered cement barrels were transported to the island And, on the Lao Sakai, a garden maid worker started with a well-known civilian business. In the county of the Oki Island, the government's railway is, of course, a private lighting railway. And at the time, the coast of the Kotkar is in particular. The coast facing the island is a poor fishing village that is a poor fishing village for one while. Just there is a cliff that a person is missing is slightly standing out. It is a remarkable place. So as it is a remote place, it is a rumor that such a winding big work starts as a length that is transmitted from the village to the village, and as it goes to the distance, it will be like a fame. And even if it hears, it will be crowded with the third side of the region Even if it is heard, it was completed by this. But if it was an event that this happened near the city, it is not different to wandering a serious sensation. That's why the work was strange. The fisherman nearby was not suspicious. Whatever you need, there is any purpose. And that person will not spare money. Digging the soil, bare the earth, build a trees, build a fence and build a house. It's also strange that people of Sauda family will not be able to live in that inconvenient to Kojima. And it's also strange that you will be able to make an amusement park to such a place. If you were young, the owner of the Sada family was rumored to be a good idea or crazy. That's why the main lord of the Hideta family at that time had hearts of epilepsy. It was bulged, and it was transmitted once a while. And it became a reputation of the neighborhood, even a good funeral. It has been run, but it is a rumor that it has changed the giralness. Sometimes there is an extreme sense, sometimes in the madness, and sometimes there. However, it was transmitted to the fishermen of the area. And this time, this work was also suspected that it was not because of that. It is not a large reputation as a great reputation to the city. Such as the Horns. People's suspicion. And this unknown business is a well-known business I went to progress. Third Mitsuki and times. The entire island is surrounded by the whole of the island. And exactly different types of long castles. A different earth wall. Inside, there is a pond, a river, a hill, a valley. And the center I was able to finish the mysterious building of huge reinforced concrete. I think that the scene is a very spectacular and magnificent. And it will be a chance to talk about it. And it will be omitted here. But it is completely completed. If I finished it, it was so wonderful. If you have seen a heart, it is not a difference that it can be inferred from the view of the islands of the Middle and devastated offshore. However, unfortunately, this big business did not finally complete, but for an unexpected event. What reason it was, only some people do not know clear. Why did things were carried in the secret? The purpose of the project was also the nature of the nature. And the reason for coming out of the scene. It was also burdened in vague. What you are dividing outside is that, because of the work of the business and the former Seda family and the missus who are the himself. There was no kid, so there was no child. It was not like that. What was inherent was inherent. The cause of death was not a lot of rumors. But just stopped the rumor, and it was not a grabbing place. And it was not about to attract the attention of the muscle. It is. After that. After all, it is not a difference in the owning area of the Hideta family. But the business is devastated. And there is no one visited. And the artificial forest and flower gardens are almost lost. Leave the weeds to bite. And the bizarre large cylinder of reinforced concrete, also exposed to wind and rain. And whenever the original shape was not stopped, the trees stone carried there, such as the trees were spent, but in the fact that it will be fell and falling to the city. However, it is not a translation of the place of one tree. Somehow, even now, you cannot do the inconvenience of travel, visit the southern end of M, and to land on the archery, and find out the trace of the artificial landscape that is unlike the world. There is no difference to you. It's a very huge garden. But from there, some people don't feel something like a somewhat tremendous plan, or art. At the same time, the person is not an adult. And it's not an aging. A piece. Or a corner of the corner. And a kind of square. There is a lot of stories that are almost uncomfortable from all. Some of the people who are close to the Hideta family are public secret. And their essential parts. But also the world's strange stories that are only known to only 2-3 people. There is. If you believe in my description. And if you believe in my description. And if you ask the last story to the end. Let's start with that secret from now on. 2. The story starts with this Tokyo, which is far away from M students with a mountain hand in Tokyo. There is a steady standing house called a fraudulent area in the city. And there is the most killed room there. And the word of Humanami is also a spool. A mysterious man who seems to have been too late for 30. He graduated from a private university that is 5-6 years before the Oki Island's major earthwork. And then no longer ask for a job. So it's not a certainty of a certain income. Finally. Continued to cry and finally flowing to this fucking building. And his major earthworking started there. He is called from philosophical education. But it is not a translation of philosophy lectures. But when there is, I'm crazy about literature. I'm crazy. And I'm hunted when I think. I went out to the classroom of the unlike no flying. I went to the classroom, etc. And I heard and watched. And if I think that, I saw my head in society, economics, etc. This time, I bought an oil painting tool. I was looking for a picture of painting. And it was strangely tired to be a fool. And I didn't really get a course that I really got it. And I graduated from school safely. It is a strange place. So, if he had a place where he has studied, it is not a rightly road of the academic. But it was not a difference that it was biased to one side of the watermark of the evil. Therefore, he is a translation that he cannot find a job yet, even if he exits school and has been a 5-year-old school. Yusuke Hamasake did not have a godly thinking about what kind of job to work on. Some of the jobs, in fact, he was tired of this world from the end where he did not experience this world. One is from his native sickness. As a result, it may have been because of his adolescence. Since his adolescence, he cannot feel like doing. It is Already enough to imagine in his head. Just in his head. He makes nothing more than a big deal, therefore. He has been in a contaminated lodgings in the year. So that it has not experienced any real house. And he has not experienced his own dream. In other words, he would not be out of the extreme dreamer. So, he said, relieved all the world and said what I had dreamed. It was about his own ideal town. A unpolled grand design. He won a few tens of ideal stories and the Ogeko story from the world since the time at the school. And by the authors of those books. We had an attention to the world by asking letters and asked the world without being realized. And imagined that feeling. Feeling a kind of resonance. That's whose himself could be smiled slightly. Among those books, he was almost unconvincing of the ideal town. Such as the economy. His heart was taken as a country of beauty. A country of beauty. As a paradise on earth. Therefore, more than Morris's Ikaria story, more than Morris Sakaya story. More than Morris. Edgar Poe's, Arnheim's Place, attracted him more. His only dreaming as a musical person by musical instruments. With a painter by canvas and paint. And as a material that poet creates various arties. One stone. One stone. One stone. One stone. One stone everyone. One flower. Or any flower. Or a bird that meets there. And every time everyone has life. Is growing every hour, as a material for those creatures. It was to create a large number of tremendous arts. This great nature made by God is not satisfied with it, and he was free to change his own individuality. And it was a beautifying and expressing the artistic big ideal of his gender there. In other words, if you change words, he became God, and to replace this nature. According to his idea, the art is, depending on the way of viewing. It is not satisfied with the human rebellion against nature. And it is not unbearable. And it would be unlikely that the desire to add each person's individuality. Hence, for example, musicians are not accompanied by the musician. The sound of the wind. The sound of the bird and the narration of the birds and beasts. And strive to create their own sounds. And the painter's work simply it is not to draw it as it is. But it is to change and beautify it by its own individuality. And it goes without saying that poets is not. But not a lot of facts and recorders. Combined, these so-called artists are more satisfied by indirect non-effective talents. Such as instruments or piners or letters. Why don't weigh this great nature itself? And, let's say the nature of the great nature itself as an instrument and make it a picture. And not use it as a letter. For evidence that is not impossible. The landscape art and architectural techniques will change to some extent so much. Change and beautifying? Can I do it more and more artistically? And more than a lot. Sosuke Himani doubts thus. Sometimes he achieved the same ideal as him. More practical than those of the above-mentioned number of utopia stories as mentioned earlier. Than their fictitious character play it looks like an ancient case's mainly tyrant something to be attracted to the sparkling sewer. For example, Egyptian pyramid, Sphinx, Greece, Rome's castle or religious large cities, China's Great Wall, Izani Mia, and Japan in Japan. Instead of imagining the utopia-like heart of the English male who created it. It's a foolish chest. If you give huge wealth to me. This is the title of the written book used by the author of the author. But also the Sankey also leaks the same voice. If you can get a lot of money that I'm out of use. First of all, I would like to buy a large area. Where it would be good. It is possible to create and show the country of the earth. The country of the beauty. And the dream country. Quote, oh. Then, in this case, without the end of the fancy. I was always not fully didn't finish my ideal town completely. If you notice. What you were crazy. It's just a day of the day of the day. It's not over the air tower. And he is a poor pity. It's a pity. It's also a pity. It's a pity. There is nothing, and in his skill. A praise lifetime was waving to a stick. And it was possible to accumulate even tens of thousands of yen and accumulating at the place where it was worked by working with a force limit. After all, he was a dreaming man, one lifetime. So, in the dream of the beauty of the sky, the real world is what is the beloved control. He falls to the 4 tatami maternal half of the dirty lodging. And I have to go to Sept the sunny day. Such a man as a lot of arts. And it is to find a substante augive there. Overwhelmed. Any art has never attracted his interest. And it was not possible to be talented. If his dream can be realized. It is indeed. And it is not a difference in the big business and the large art. Therefore, once you have taken him who crawl about this dream idea, any business in the world, any entertainment, but that no artificial art, but not worthwhile. It was not worthwhile to take it. It was not impossible. Well, I'm not going to eat something that I lost my interest in. All things that I don't like to do. Some ways to eat. In contrast, he has been a subcontractor of cheap translation. And it is a felle or a novel of an adult novel. And it is a novel of the company I was standing for. The first is still a bit interested in art. And I was able to find a little unusual to announce his dreams in the form of a story like an Irid like Utopia author. Somewhat. I continued such work. But what? His writing is as a separate translation. And the creation was strangely bad for magazine. That's why he was a substitute of one of the other events in various forms. And it was a toughness of one of them. So it was a substitute for one of them. It must be not impossible. That's why. The creation of the creation that wrapped and wrapped and wrapped the magazine is not about once. But it brought it to it. But his nature is just playing in the play of the character. Since I was satisfied. It was too connive. So I cannot go straight to the novel. Since it is also troubled with the life of the day after. Stopping it. It is dangerous. But I was there. But I had no longer out of going to the life of the 3-letter staff. He writes a manuscript of a single piece. And in my spontaneous time. It is a view of his dreamgery. And it is a design picture of a building that built there. Written. While breaking. It was possible to realize their dreams remained as I thought. And I thought about the courtesy of the ancient Caesarans. And I thought about my heart. 3. Well, I talk about a place where Husai Sasuke is sending a day to live in such a state. One day. It is one day. And the major earthwork of the example starts. It will be before the year. But it starts with the fact that the wonderful good luck came in. It was a thing that is a queer. Such as good luck. Such as good luck. So it's a wonderful thing. It's a thing that is a place where it is a place similar to the fellow. It was similar. He tends to be a wonderful joy who is in touch with the good news. And if you think of it, and there is a strange joy who has never experienced it. And the next moment, the remainder of his own ideas the scary. I learned the battle of the teeth's root. The person who has notified that notification was his classmate. One newspaper reporter. But one day, the man has a long time. And he visits the Shimasuke's lodging and what the story of something. Of course he did not feel like that. And I used to say something. Sometimes, you still know, and your big brother died in a few days ago. What did you say? The time of the time, I couldn't answer the opponent's strange words, and I did not have to ask. Hora, you forgot anymore. It's a partial division of an example. It's a partial division of twins. Goo. Ow, Kaida? That big money has a big deal. It was surprised that the guy is surprised. I sent a manuscript from the correspondence. According to that, it seems that I was killed by the epilepsy of the teacher. I did not recover while the seizure had happened. I did something. Quote, after that, the newspaper reporter said such a thing. Even though I was also impressed. I would like to say, well, what a good thing. You and that man has a recent picture of Seda with the manuscript. But if you look at it, it was about 5-6 years from the 5th year. And you have come to a resembling than school days. The finger came to the place of the picture of that photo. And there is a finger to it. So it's just like it. By this conversation, as the reader is imagined, the husband of poor Renewal and the Michido Mount Mu County Toma Saburo is a university classmate. And the strange thing is outside, since the students who were nicknamed from the students. The face-to-face, the spinner, and the voices. It was two. Sanmare has called Sabada Saburo as a twin brother. And he was asked to be a younger brother. And he tried to take two people. While being caught up, they did not go to the fact that they never recognized that their nickname is never false. Such a thing is that, though it is not a twin child, as a lively learning, as a twin life, it was only one sincerity. In particular, it is a fear of the cause. As if it comes to the fact that it has led to blast a surprising monster in the world. Both of them were those who did not show the face to the classroom. And that the Sankey is a mild look and used a starting sprinkle. And there are a few opportunities to combine the two people, because one of the places is a glasscraft. It was possible to separate well from a distance. So I did not get a sashimi. But still, it is still a laughing story. In a long student life there was a thing that was not about 20. They were very similar to them. Since one division of the so-called twins died, I was able to get some surprise. Then I was in contact with the Fujian. But even if he was, it was not about to feel unexpectedly. Because he was hugging, because he was so excited to him, because he was too similar to Yoshida. However, this event was not known and there was an interview with people. It was a surprise rather than sadness. And rather than surprise, something like a strange feeling that is strange. Strangely spooky. I was not aware of the other party's newspaper reporter after that. And I was not aware of it until I returned to the public. And I was back home. But after it became one person with regard to the death of Seda, who remains in various ways a long-lasting fancy as a quick mistake. And it is the case of the end of the evening cloud. And it is the end of his head. I came up. He became true blue and beat his teeth. And while trembling, while I was sucked, I stayed at one place. And I was looking at the idea that I came to see clearly in myself. At some time, I tried to push up a squirrel. One after another. But I tried to prevent it. But why it stops? But if you press it, it's a bad idea of 100-color glasses. And one of the bad things up to one scene came to be fantastic. 4. One serious motive that has come to think about such a so-called unprecedented evil. Such as that, in the region of M. Provinsu, in the region of M. Province, is generally not a cremation. And in the upper class such as the Hideta family, it was said that it is very important to run crunchy and always engaged in crumbment. That was a good idea to hear from his mouth of Hamada Hiroda. And the other was that the cause of death of Seda was from seizures of epilepsy. This also did not call his memory. Sankey, who was happy or unhappy, or before Hartman, Bush, Kampner, and I had a sewing book. And in particular for the burial of temporary death. I had a political knowledge since I was a death by epilepsy. I was very uncertain. And it was a good understanding of the hazards of the raw buried. Many readers are probably reading a short story called Early Burial of Pooh, and Let's have a fear of the burial of temporary death. The fact that it was buried while life was fought in the fate of humanity. These extreme misfortunes. Bartholomew's massacre. Case of the other historical foster casualty. And this is often a place where this is often. And what is happening in this world is a place that cannot be denied by a person who is a little bit. Death and raw partial boundaries, or it is a shadow where the life is over and where the death is ended. Who can be died? In some diseases, the external organization of life may be suspended. And this case, such paused state is just canceling. Because it is only a temporary shutdown of the unusable system. So, after a while, if it is several hours, it is a few days, or as a few tens of times, a strange power that is not visible works. And a small gear, a large gear moves again like magic. Quote, and it is not possible to doubt that it is one of the diseases, such as the disease like that. For example, in some cases, even in some cases of diseases that were easy to occur in the prospects of the promotional book of the Prevention Association of the Fried Prevention Association of the Fried Birth of Raw Brewing, Inc. He still remembered that, yes. When he reads an example of a number of quinicked cancer burials, it will be wondering how it feels like. For a kind of feeling that the name has been all. The words of fear or battle were too common. And it was possible to be a mediocrity. For example, it was also included in the mouth of bloody baby children. It was an impression that I was baked and I left for a while. In addition, he did not notice that he was so clear that he has been a disease with such danger. Whereas he was so cool. But I did not notice a little by human heart. When he readed those books, he was released to be a division of twins. Who was cured with him. And Seda, who is a large amount of holes. And still aware that they are invisible. It cannot be said that it was not, as mentioned earlier. Hassa, who is a dream home. Who is a dream home. Who thought he was thinking and he was not aware of the case, that he was not aware of the hooky and not aware of it. If it seems to be young. The seated in his mind before several years. And it is not considered to be a hooked form that the death of Masada now has a warm form. But that's why it is a horn. A bad horn. And his world is so. While fevering cold sweat out of his body from the body. It continues to sit down at that night. Not later. And continues to sit down, the beginning of the first time. It was a hymn or a dream. But little by little, I started with a real color little by little. And I will always fulfill it. If I get a hand down, it will come true. Somewhat like me. Somewhat like me, and that reason is that it is not like that. There is no way. Since the person started, there is one person who has made such a foolish idea. Under a detective novel. One of the twins is one of the two Biffs. And the story that works alone is read alone. But even though the actual world is not good at the actual world, isn't it a positive madness such as a misfortune? Don't consider it. And you're looking forward to your lifetime. You're looking forward to a lifetime. Several times. Thinking about such a wind. I tried to swing the more fearful delusion. But in addition, from that, I will also. But if you think about it, it's rarely not as a little danger. No more than that. Certainty, certainly. However, the danger will be broken. If you were successful. You had a dream that you had a long time ago. And I was able to get the funds of your dreams. And the fun of that time, well. I'm happy. Anyway, I'm getting tired. It's a lifetime that is not going to go. Yoshinjo. What kind of lonely falling to that time? In fact, if you drop a life, it's not a person who does not kill a person alone. And it is not a translation that poisoned the world. But this is the existence of this. And the existence of this is the first time. And it will be aware of the game of Sabaru Saburo. It is only possible. And if you say what to do. Old, natural remodeling. The creation of the landscape. That is, it's not a tremendous, or a large-scale artistic product, or a paradise, isn't it, not to create a heaven of heaven? Anyway, there is a point that I was able to do it. And I said that I was dying once. Once I was died. If you think about the joy. What you think. You believe that it's like a big vulgarity. But if you look at it, if you look at the results one by one, if you decide and take out the results one by one, isn't it good for good morning? Quote. If you look up and looking at the line, it is said that it is said that it is the case. The provisional order. And if there is a little failure on execution, and there are almost no points to meet the conscience. What was the convenient thing to do? This plan is that the family of Saburo is. The parents will not be lost. But one person. His young slice is cut. And there are several employees after that. It was just a thing. They have a sister. And there is one sister. A bride to a noble in Tokyo. And if you look at the country, if you look at such a landlord, there will be a lot of relatives, and there will be a lot of relatives if they know that there is a man who has a man who is a man who is late for those who says that they are dinner and two people. And there is a rumor position. It will not be imagined that you should not be like this, and there is no such thing that the man appears as a replacement ball of Genburo. Besides, he was born. And it was also a good man who wantness and play. It is a difference to the slender. And it is not a difference to know the habit of Saburo until the thin place. But this person's thorns. But if you are at the heart, avoid as much as possible to the words of the couple. If you were, you will probably never notice. Besides, once I died once. I think that it was a strange thing that was somewhat more and more likely. And if I think that it is like such a thing for anomalous events, I do not think much. I'm sorry. Thus his idea goes into a fine point. But as it thinks about these dies, these large plans are one step. Reality. Possibilities to come. I saw. The remaining place is not a difference in the maximum difficult to take on his plan. But how do you kill his own body? Or how to use it? Or how to resuscitate Seda? It was said that how to dispose of the genuine Seda corpse. Since this great ventilation, he himself, he's truly defends. He was a long-awaited so-called sometimes. Then I was able to solve the most difficult points of those most difficult things in thinking about Kun-kun and the obsession. And after thinking about this, he again, once again, I thought about what I thought. Again. And if there is no chance of one point, I finally execute it. It was not possible to determine whether to determine if it is or not. 5. When blood is gathered at the head. And if so, the plan that is thinking about it is now. But it may be more than one day. But I thought about it. Thinking about the idea. And needed. After all, he was extremely quite to make it. When I remembered and remembered. My heartache is like a dream-free disease. And even if I take it to run, it is strangely empty. And it seems that the important thing is to be out of the realistic thing in the corners of the heart. It is actually a dream that is now a dream. And it is a dream that another real world is waiting for. The dream of the dream. I was continuing. Strange. As mentioned earlier, his plan was divided into two important parts. The first is that he himself, that is, the human sanning human beings from this world. But in the future, he went to T-City with the house of Seda once. And I was funeral. Whether or not it can be sneaked into the graveyard. The young wife of Sauda as what person? What kind of person? The air quality of the servant needs and putting them for 1 point. Was, as a result. If you look at the risk that this plan has been a risk that this plan has failed. There is no slower even if you get started with the beginning. And there is still room for remaining. Of course, it is not necessary to deteriorate that he appeared in T-City in this way, even if the figure is a Humanison or Susunu, or if it is misfired. It was a mistake in his plan, even if it is misunderstanding. So he decided to disagree with himself and took a trip to the first T-City. His dissembling method is a very unlikely thing, throwing away the glasses so far, and a large size, large scale, uninterrupted form, a color glass mirror, and focusing on one eye. Apply a largely folded gauze, and put it in the mouth. Put it with an incorrect and inconspicuous mouth and make the head 5 minutes. However, it was just a lot of times, but the effect was really surprising. And during the departure, I was able to get a friend in the train and did not feel a little bit. The most noticeable thing in the human face is the most self-numbered individuality. And there is no difference in both eyes. That was the effect of hiding from the nose with his palm and hidden below the nose. The effect is different. In the previous case, you cannot mislead if you're young. But in the later case, you will be sure to say that he will soon. Therefore, he first used a color glass to hide his 2 eyes. However, in the case of the color glasses, almost completely fully hiding the eye facial expression, it is something that gives a smell to the person who is putting it. In order to erase this feeling, he fed the gauze to one eye and an eye disease patient. In this way, it is also possible to hide a part of the eyebrows and cheeks at the same time. And it is also a two-way advantage. Besides, if you change your hair as much as possible, and devise clothes, the purpose of the discount could reach the purpose of the disguise. But he is carefully, from the cheeks changing the jawline and decided to hide the characteristics of the mouth by the eyelids. If it is possible to change it as well as that, 9 minutes 999 Sankey will be eliminated. He has one opinion on disguise, and using man and pigments, but not only handling. But it has the disadvantage that it is not good. But it is not suitable for practical use. But this easy, if you use a good method. He believed that it was not a Japanese man, and it was not possible to disguise it. He is the next day, and there is a spectacular list, and it is a journey to go to the temporary accommodation, and it is a journey of the south of the Izu Peninsula. At first I told you that I would like to go to the person. And I left my little line Leah, and, on the way, I bought the necessary goods. And when I finished the disguise that I said, I will go to Tokyo Station straight. And I'm going to Tokyo Station. And Lee is a temporary deposit. And the 2-3 destination stations of T-City when I bought a ticket up to me. He brings into the crowds of the 3-way car. He arrived in T-City. Then he was fully oversight. And in the daytime, his solitary way. He was actually acted by his solitary way. And after all, we were able to end the purpose. The details will be so taut. So we will omit it on the rabbit. But the results of the horns and surveys revealed that his plan is never impossible. Then he went back to Tokyo Station again. The 3rd day from the day when I heard the story of the example newspaper reporter. And the day of the 6th day from the day when the funeral of Saburo Sabaru was held. It was time, because he is late for his idea. It is a stack of revival him within 20 days after the death of Saburo. So it must be said to be very busy for 4 days. And after he receives a pilot turning, when I entered the station's toilet and removed the example of the example, I returned to the original people. And I was rushed to the steam staking place of the Sakai Island with the foot. The ship of Izudori is 9 o'clock. Riding it on it, and the corner and horns are oriented south of the Izu Peninsula. When I put on a wait place, the bell of Galangan and boarding signs rang on the ship. The ticket was to. The destination was Shimoda Port. Leah, and the dark pier was broken. And it was a whistle of the hatch and entering the hatch. 6. What was convenient for his goal is that the two-way batting is just 2 servers. But it is 2 people. And it is a country party. Cell kimono. When I came out of the cells, my face was burned on a day when the face is also ridiculous. And instead, my head work was a slightly insensitive middle-aged man. When Hitomi Shimasuke shuts down and enters the cabin, he spoke to the corner of the corner. And it was lying on the fleeting blanket. Of course, it was not a translation that is not a translation. But I was able to see the situation of 2 men at a time. Gorogoro Goten, and an organization that can be brought into nerves will be transmitted to the whole body. The light of dull lights surrounded by iron grids, hiding his shadows, and throwing a long and blanket. In the Yushiro, men look at the acquaintances and are still sitting with Bosoboso. And their voices become a tightness of the institution and make a dancey rhythm that is strangely inviting, a sleepy rhythm. Besides, the sea is calm. The sound of the wave is low. And it is not good at the sway. And if it is still lying down, the excitement of the 2-day 3-day goal is gradually quiet in the empty, unauthorized anxiety. I came up with Moya Moya. It's not yet late. You should abandon it quickly. Before you get backwards, you should abandon it quickly. You are trying to do your mistakes in the course of yourself? I'm not a joke. Is it one thing? So the mental condition, you are healthy? Is it healthy? Young or somewhere there is a failure. His anxiety went up with time. In addition, he can throw away this big attraction. Another heart begins with his uneasy heart. Where are you? Concerned about it. There is no way to work. Is it possible to abandon the work we planned so far? And in his head, one of his prospects appears one after another. Over a minute point. Moreover, every one of them was a slightly decimal decline. And there was no other way. When I just realized that 2 customers of 2 customers were a while. Instead, the sound of 2 different sites of the condition was echoed from the facing side of the room. If you hit the turn off and look at the details, the men are healthy and have a big letter. And they are fucked well. To be continued. Thank you for your viewing. If you like, please subscribe to the channel. I am very encouraged.